Welcome to Coleman Report Live. I'm Bob Coleman. We're talking Main Street and the small business lenders who help it grow. Katie Roach, thank you for joining us. Lance Sexton, thank you. Friday, a lot of stuff going on. You know how to ask questions. Today's show, we're going to talk a lot about questions. Hopefully, I misspoke, Lance. We're going to talk about a lot of your answers to a bunch of questions. How's that sound, Lance?
It works for me, Bob.
We'll even let the Katie fan club hear from her. So, what SBA Farm is getting the most success in processing forgiveness?
And this was a holdover from yesterday, right?
Right.
It'd be interesting if it changed, but it really hadn't changed dramatically.
Yeah, and Lance, you agree. Lance and Katie both agree with that, correct?
Well, I think the reason for that is the 3508S. You couldn't put it into the portal until this week. So prior to that, there probably were quite a few 3508 EZs that went in. I think the 3508, the old original form, we'll see those are the bigger, more complicated PPP deals.
I'm gonna jump around, Joseph, and I love this comment by Russell and Lance. I know that this is near and dear to your heart as well. Russell just had a statement which said, this statement is from the PPP loan application form. There it is, mind-boggling. The estimated time for completing this application, including gathering data, is 8 minutes.
Wow, is that on the 3508S?
I didn't see it on there, but maybe
Actually, it's from the loan application. So he's
yeah, 8 minutes. Normally, when you see a OMB time, it'll tell you a time, and you can do it in about a third of what they have on there. In this particular case, I think that's a little skinny on the time necessary to complete it.
I agree. Anyway, Russell, thank you for your comments. Poll question number 2. Have you had any PPP loan forgiveness decisions on loans with idle deductions? And that's an important topic we're going to discuss today.
Well, I think it's a very important topic for all PPP lenders.
Wow. Almost 50%. We'll talk about that. And finally, do you intend on seeking full forgiveness on all PPP loans? I don't know why. I don't know why. Lance, bail me out here. Why are we doing this one?
Bob, this is an easy one. The answer is absolutely you want full forgiveness on all of them because you want them off of your books.
There you go. Okay.
You want to get paid.
Very good. All right.
So, I mean, I think it's subject to how our PPP loan applicants spent their money. And there's a question today, Bob, I'm sure you're going to bring it up, that is a pretty interesting question about PPP forgiveness.
Well, let's talk about it. Katie, let's put this into context. What are we talking about, and what is this study telling us?
So this is a fairly recent study from about a week ago that Fundera did that's really looking at how the borrowers are approaching these forgiveness applications. And what they're finding is a lot of them have no clue how this process is supposed to work. A lot of them are trying to reach out to their lenders or just waiting for their lenders to give them some kind of information about what they need to start submitting and things like that, or if they should even submit. A lot of them said 23% said their lender told them to wait to submit on forgiveness, which actually surprised me. I thought that number would be a little bit bigger. Maybe some lenders are starting to accept a little more now. But there's still 64% awaiting instructions of some sort from their lenders. So you're seeing the borrowers very confused right now. And also, of course, there's the deductions, which I think we'll talk about a little bit more later. The borrowers really didn't expect that going into it, and now they're confused whether that's going to affect them or not. And of course, we know as of right now, if they had an idle loan, then they're probably going to end up with some kind of deduction on their PPP.
Lance, do you agree with that
Yeah,
number?
I don't-
Only 10% voiced fears that forgiveness of their entire loans will be denied.
Well, I think that there's going to be a surprise. It's like coming to the Christmas tree when you're a kid on Christmas morning, and you open up your toys and you're so excited, and then there's that one box left, and you open it up and there's a pair of blue jeans in it. The idle forgiveness piece was something that wasn't talked about when this first started. Rightfully so. The program was rushed out, but participant lenders were not aware that the idle advances would be deducted from the PPP forgiveness, and these borrowers were just needing help. So they were applying for everything that was out there.
They still need help.
And so, I was talking with this about a friend of mine who is also involved in PPP and SBA lending, and we were talking about, okay, you got the borrower who applied for both. They got the PPP loan first. They forgot about the idle, and all of a sudden they get an idle advance, and not thinking that it wouldn't. Now, granted, the net effect is they got the same amount of money twice, and it's only being forgiven once. But the impact on the PPP borrowers, they're going to have a balance that's going to have a pretty short payback. The impact on the participant lender is some of these loans that they thought were going to go away are going to linger for 2 to 5 years.
Yeah. Katie, do we know if these stats are based on a particular bucket of loans less than 50,000, or is this PPP?
This is just overall. I think they had over 100,000 people answering questions and things like that, depending on if it was applicable to them. So I think it's just a big mix of a bunch of different buckets.
I want to thank Sandra for bringing this to our attention. She sent us the letter from the trade association. These are all the trade associations on board with what are they advocating, Katie?
So this was part of a letter that was sent out October 19th to Congress, and it's asking about the idle deductions, saying that really that was not something that the lenders or the borrowers expected. That's going to end up hurting Main Street, and it's also going to end up having a whole bunch of these PPP loans on these lenders' balance sheets that are these smaller loans that they expected to get rid of. They say at the end they don't really have much of a goal except for just maybe stop the transfer of idle advances to PPP balance sheets. I think they're wanting to eventually try to get rid of that deduction, but I don't know what that's going to mean, especially since we've got, almost half of the respondents today said that they've already received decisions on these loans. So,
as Lance was saying, there's a lot of lenders. You're right. They may have gotten forgiveness twice, but they all of a sudden they think, I don't have to pay this back, and all of a sudden, bam, you have a $20,000 liability on your books you were not planning. And as you said, Lance, how long do we have to pay that off in?
Well, in the 2 to 5 years, Bob, but the reality is the borrowers applied for these with the intention of forgiveness on the idle advance and forgiveness on the PPP loan.
Well, that was my understanding also. I thought they got both, but what do I know?
The participant bank made the PPP loan without realizing that there was a potential deduction based on, I mean, what do you do as a participant bank? Say no. If they get an idle advance after the fact, you're not going to know about it.
Yeah.
Until,
I think this is another one of those loose ends that will be resolved. I hope. I don't see anybody up in arms against the proposal. Unfortunately, as John Riosty said yesterday, it looks like this isn't going to be handled before the election, if not until after the first of the year. So these are another string unraveling in the ball that we need to tighten up, Lance.
Bob, what happens to the hundreds of thousands well, I don't know if it's hundreds of thousands, but the significant number of PPP loans where forgiveness decisions were made with the idle advance reducing the PPP loan forgiveness amount. I mean, the problem with our Congress is something like this needs an answer tomorrow or Monday. It doesn't need an answer in January.
Well, you're speaking to the choir. You're preaching to the choir here, Lance.
Yeah. To our SBA citizens, Bob.
There you go. No, good SBA citizens.
Good SBA citizens.
Let's talk about bad SBA citizens. What a nice sequel. We got an email. What's going on with our friends in Indianapolis? The indictments are all still in place. The trial has been rescheduled from August 31st to February 1st. And the other story we're following is the Washington Federal Bank savings out of Illinois. So we will obviously be following that. What my editorial comment on this is, it's gone deep into the organization, and the feds chose to go after people who were processing the paperwork and bluntly did not participate in the alleged ill-gotten gains. Katie?
Right. We're seeing with both of these cases, really, there are people who are employees who worked at these banks, and they did not really expect to end up entangled in fraud, especially when your boss tells you to do something. They're probably thinking their boss knows better or things like that. So it's really kind of sad for all these workers as well.
No. This is not a pleasant situation. Let's get to the questions. We have a ton of questions. Ben asks, the deferment is 10 months from the end of the covered period. If the borrower submits a forgiveness app, then the deferment continues until the SBA issues a decision. That should be a question mark, I would guess.
Bob, I'm going to say Ben not only issued a question, but he issued the answer. Because that is perfectly on point, Ben. Deferment's 10 months from the end of the covered period, depending on what the covered period is. Once they submit a forgiveness application and a decision is issued, that's when the deferment is going to end.
Stephanie asked the question, can lenders get a list of their idle advances in their PPP portfolio?
That's in the PPP Forgiveness platform. You're supposed to be able to access that in the platform.
Patrick says, hey, we've submitted a timely forgiveness app. Does the borrower have to make any payments on its loan prior to SBA remitting the forgiveness amount?
Again, Patrick, what we talked about is depending on what the covered period is, there's a deferment for 10 months from the end of the covered period. We're not there on any of the PPP loans now. So if they've submitted their forgiveness app, the answer is no, they don't have to make payments.
And that's why you made that comment yesterday that, hey, these delinquencies aren't going to start hitting until May or June. Is that?
Yeah, we shouldn't see delinquencies on PPP loans until middle part of 2021. Now, Bob, one thing that we forgot to talk about on these idle advance reductions, they're going to be small balance loans on in a lender's portfolio that are going to require servicing. So there's going to be expense related to these small balance loans that remain on the books. So I sure hope they work that out.
Well, the other thing we haven't talked about is the 7A and 504. They got deferment for 6 months? And when are those deferments up? November?
Well, they did not get deferment. They got CARES Act payments.
I'm sorry.
So it's kind of like a deferment. They didn't have to make a payment, but the payments were being made for them by SBA. For most of the existing SBA portfolio, when the CARES Act was passed, those payments now have ended in September. Some of those borrowers may need a deferment coming out of that, depending on what kind of condition they're in. Some may not. Now, granted, there are other SBA borrowers who will continue to get CARES Act payments. For instance, I closed the loan late September. They will get 6 CARES Act payments made for them. But for the bulk of the SBA portfolio, the CARES Act payments are done. They're completed.
How much of an issue do you anticipate that affecting lender portfolios?
I think that in certain industries, the CARES Act payments are what kept them propped up and current.
Oh, absolutely.
And in some industries, we may see a delinquency right out of the gate during the month of October. There are other businesses that did well that are doing well during the pandemic, and they won't miss a beat now that they have to make their own payments. But we will see delinquencies rise. There's no question about it.
Barbara raises an interesting question. It says, do others agree with the joint trade letter? She says, and it was my opinion and understanding from the beginning that the idle advances and PPP forgiveness were a one or other option, not both. She said, we prepared our borrowers accordingly and let them know. So I guess the question is, Barbara had it right. Why was this such a why is this such a shock to the industry that it looks like a lot of lenders and borrowers didn't?
Well, Bob, I think that the like many parts of PPP, I was explaining this to my wife. It's like sometimes she'll be in the room next to me when I'm doing the show, and she'll say, wow, you get asked a lot of questions. And I'm like, the interesting part about it is the answers can change on a daily basis based on what SBA comes out with. So a correct answer today may not be a correct answer next Monday. And when PPP came out,
or in an hour.
Yeah, I'm not sure that everybody had time to fully digest the requirements of the PPP loan program. Obviously, Barbara, I think they got it right, but a lot of lenders were just trying to get money out to their borrowers and may have missed the idle advance issue. So it's an issue that needs to be addressed.
Barbara follows up and says there were also borrowers who got idle loans after they got the PPP loans and their advances were withheld. How do we address this?
That's going to be a question for PPP Forgiveness at SBA.gov. I'm not exactly sure.
Russell wants to clarify the maximum idle advance was $10,000, correct? Well, they meant forgiveness.
Yeah.
Let's see. Russell just makes another comment. ICBA is urging Congress to pass this legislation. It's not fair that this was not disclosed. So Barbara would figure it out, but he's saying, hey, we didn't disclose this to the borrowers and they should not be burdened with this type of loan. Hey, this is an interesting question from Enrique. And what he's saying is that some payments are coming from the lenders, and what do we do on that? I haven't heard of that, Lance.
Clients are having payments come their way from lenders. What do they do? Well, again, the Flexibility Act changed the rules on the deferments on PPP loans. I'm wondering if Enrique is an accountant or some other service provider.
I'll tell you what, let's do this. I didn't understand the question. You obviously are having an issue with it. Enrique, can you clarify it and resend that to you, and we'll address it next week. Lance, what are we talking about next week on your webinar?
Well, just like we talked about, delinquencies should rise in SBA portfolios. The webinar on Wednesday is going to give you the tools and tricks to properly service a delinquent SBA loan. And there are some things in the 5057-2 that you're required to do to protect your guarantee. So we're going to cover all those tricks and techniques and help you be ready if your delinquencies in your SBA portfolio do rise. So please sign up.
And Lance is going to talk about 7A 504 as well as a PPP component to that. Hey, this is the 12th year we've done our hospitality webinar. For those of you who are participated in the past, Anthony Failer is coming on. He's great, wealth of information. I'm starting to put that together. I know Lance is going to be part of that, and we are excited to give guidance on both acquisitions as well as construction. Finally, we made a mistake. We scheduled our secondary market webinar on November 11th. We're still working out dates with SBA to hope for their participation. So that's our new tentative date. Obviously, it's a virtual. We're not going to. Lance, we're going to miss the nice steaks in Washington, D.C. I think Katie went to it last year also. So sorry, y'all.
No Walensky's this year?
No Smith and Walensky's.
Yeah.
No Washington steaks or wine or we're gonna do Uber Eats in our house. How's that?
There we go. There we go.
Hey, everyone, have a nice weekend. We appreciate your time. We know you're busy. The interesting times continue. Hopefully, we have some more specific news next week. We're going to have a ton of news, obviously, in 2 weeks after I think something's happening on Tuesday, November 3rd. But thank you for joining us and for supporting America's Main Street, one entrepreneur at a time.
Have a great weekend.